This is Dr. Saifullah from the Department of English, now Nalanda, Mahavihar, Nalanda. In this lecture of mine, I'll be talking about classical criticism. This paper is specially designed and made for MA English 4th and students, paper 16, but this is equally valuable and useful for all the students who are doing their classical criticism paper. So let us begin now. Literary criticism and critical theory are formulated to judge the intrinsic worth and relative merits of literary works of art, as various as poetry, drama, fiction, essays, short stories, music, painting, sculpture, architecture, and so on and so forth. But before criticism exists, it is necessary that creation must be available. Today, criticism has developed and branched out in various directions, and works of art have come to be judged with the application of various critical yardsticks and critical theories propounded by writers of multidisciplinary studies. But as students of literature, we should know that all these latter developments find their premises in classical criticism. The classical period in ancient time, ranging from 8th century to 4th century BC, has been a very golden and fertile period in the history of ancient Greece and Rome. These writers, despite being ancient writers, were also modern writers at a particular point in history and used to respect their own ancient pasts also. There are innumerable literary works pertaining to art, music, poetry, painting, prosody, rhetoric that were created under the sole leadership of these writers, and they all form base for our current critical discussion. The three classical works, Republic, Poetics, and Ars Poetica, are attributed to Plato, Aristotle, and Horace, respectively. And Longinus on the Sublime is no less remarkable in its own right. We also have Socrates, Sophocles among the few jewels of our classical age. The ancient Greek and Roman culture was the earliest of the cultures in the history of human civilization. The Greek academia in Athens consisted of intellectuals of the time, including Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, to discuss and debate issues of their states and administrations. During that period, written literature was not so prominent, hence great emphasis was laid on the gift of the gab, that is the power of oration or rhetoric, that writers like Cicero mastered. Among various traits that an Athenian brought, traits of rhetoric and dialogue were greatly revered. According to Sophocles, a man is revealed through his speech. Now, Plato is the great Greek philosopher and thinker of the 4th century BC. He is the disciple of Socrates. His range of knowledge is regarded to be encyclopedic. He is regarded to be the first great commentator on literature. He is a moralist and believes that all good works of art have to serve the society. His theory of imitation, called mimesis, is very pertinent to understanding his concept of criticism. Plato was in search of an ideal truth, and he felt that it is the duty of the poets to tell the truth so that the society breathes in a happy and healthy state. No doubt, to him, poetry or any kind of fictional creation is a mimetic art, an art of imitation. What does the poet imitate? He imitates this objective world. But Plato argues that poets do not imitate the ideal truth or real reality, because by imitating this objective world, which is in itself an imitation of an ideal conception of the world, they imitate an imitation. So poetry becomes an imitation of an imitation, a copy of a copy, a derivative of a derivative, and so he says that poetry is not to be relied upon, it is twice removed from reality. Since he was a moralist, he wanted that his society should be guided to right path rather than led astray from truth. So he called poets liars. He also said that poetry fed and watered our passions instead of drying them up. So he banished all the poets from his ideal republic. Plato says that poets and painters are engaged in a similar kind of activity or preoccupation. Poets' raw materials are words, painters' raw materials are colors. Plato criticized poetry on moral grounds. In order to illustrate how poetry and other imitative arts are far away from metaphysical reality, he takes the example of a carpenter making a table or a chair. The table is nothing but an imitation of an ideal table, and so anyone who will paint this table on paper or discuss about it in words will be far away from rendering the reality which only exists in the metaphysical realm. Plato failed to understand the difference between poetic creation and social upliftment. He advocated art for the sake of society. Later on, writers took their cue from Plato's conception of creation. It was left to Aristotle, his disciple, to rescue poetry from the allegation. Plato had alleged that dramas and such representations play with our emotions, and by long indulging in them, we tend to lose our individuality. We grow weak, timid, trivial, indisciplined, wayward, and what not. But Plato, but Aristotle praised poetry and drama on the same ground. He also agreed that poetry is obviously a mimetic art. Unlike history, philosophy, and science, it imitates poetic truth, which is very much true in its own way and is a source of aesthetic pleasure. He goes on to say that art imitates nature. He says that art does not need to serve any master other than its own. So he ushers in the concept of art for the sake of art. Aristotle's reply to Plato's theory of imitation is grand. To his another charge that poetry makes human beings weak by playing upon their emotions. He says that the audience do not internalize whatever is going on the stage. They identify themselves with the characters, no doubt, but by watching such emotions, they grow wise. The tragic play enunciates two emotions, pity and fear, which Plato felt are corrosive to human beings. But these emotions actually bring about a healthy outlet of our pent up emotions. Aristotle says that by arousing pity and fear, catharsis is produced. The word catharsis is open to various interpretations as Aristotle himself has not explicated it. Catharsis may be called a medical metaphor or a therapy that purges and purifies the emotions of pity and fear, thereby producing a healthy state. And that is why Aristotle posits that good literature produces aesthetic pleasure. It makes a city a better city and human beings better citizen. So poetry is worthy of serious consideration. Further, Aristotle discusses about tragic heroes, elements of tragedy, and the nature of tragedy. To him, tragedy is a serious affair of life, no doubt, but it must be a structurally whole with all the paraphernalia. This was the Aristotelian model of Greek tragedy that has been adopted by writers of the succeeding generations. This model of Aristotelian tragedy was also imitated by Aristotle from his classical masters. Tragedy as a work of serious art has six constituent elements: plot, thought, character, song, diction, and a spectacle. No doubt, each contributes to the other, and yet Aristotle says that plot is the soul of tragedy. There can be tragedy without characters, but not without plot. Plot is the integration of events, and so for the progress of tragedy, there ought to be a conflict, because no conflict, no drama. A tragedy moves from conflict, exposition, resolution, climax, and anticlimax. What happens in a tragedy or a comedy? Tragedy imitates actions, so does comedy. But the basic difference is that tragedy imitates serious actions of nobler men, whereas comedy imitates trivial actions of meaner men. Aristotle feels that human beings are liable to err despite best of the precautions. So, the tragic character of Aristotle is not superhero. He is neither a paragon of virtue nor very vicious, neither very strong nor very weak. He is very much human beings like us. He has tragic flaw which Aristotle calls hamartia. It is due to this Aristotelian hamartia that he fails or falls. There is no role of fate or chance or supernatural agency in his fall. In a Shakespearean tragedy, the role of fate and chance cannot altogether be ruled out. The tragic flaw of the heroes is aggravated and exacerbated by some unseen force, and hence the inevitable fall is hastened. And so, apparently, classical criticism gives us a peep into the very nature and character of poetic creation. Neither Aristotle nor Plato is wrong, and that each has his own perspectives. One movement or critical theory is a response to another movement or critical theory. Taking cue from classical criticism, we have Elizabethan criticism, Romantic criticism, Neoclassical criticism, and Modernist criticism. Each has their own stand. But Plato and Aristotle are the grand masters of English literary criticism of the ancient time. Plato stands for the head, whereas Aristotle stands for the heart. But both of them were great followers and admirers of tradition. They also valued order, beauty, balance, decorum, discipline, structure, and rules and regulations in writing. Later on, the Neoplatonists and Neo-Aristotelians assessed the ideologies and thoughts of their masters. The neoclassical thoughts were greatly adopted in France, Germany, and other European countries at a later time. Homer was such a great hero of the Greek tragedy that the great Augustan poet Alexander Pope sings about him in his heroic couplet. Let Homer be your study and delight. You read them by day and meditate by night. So I think that this is enough for today. I'm sure that I'll be available to you very soon with another video of mine on another topic. Till then, you take care of yourself, stay at home, stay safe. Bye bye.